Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to session 11 of Santhavani. The afternoon unfolds with reflections from the message of love, compassion, and forgiveness brought to humanity by Christ. It is our honor to welcome His Excellency Archbishop Dr. Peter Machado, Archbishop of Bangalore, an eminent spiritual guide and a gently voice of harmony. Your Excellency, with deep respect, we invite you to address the gathering, sir. I would like to call on the stage my colleague, Sri Prakash Kamatji, to give a brief introduction about our esteemed guest.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all. It's my pleasure to give a brief introduction of Archbishop Peter Machado. Archbishop Peter Machado, the 7th Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Bangalore, was born on May 26, 1954 in Honnavar, Uttar Kannada district. After completing his seminary studies at the Papal Seminary in Pune, he was ordained a priest on December 8, 1978 for the Diocese of Karwar. He holds a commerce degree from Pune University and a doctorate in canon law from the Pontifical Urbania University in Rome. On February 2, 2006, Pope Benedict XVI appointed him Bishop of Belgaum, where he was ordained on March 30 of the same year. Following 12 years of dedicated service in Belgaum, he was appointed Archbishop of Bangalore on March 19, 2018 and installed on May 31, 2018. Recently, on January 29, 2023, he was entrusted with the responsibility of Chairman Bishop of the CCBI Laity Commission, continuing his distinguished journey of faith and leadership. I now request Archbishop Peter Machado to present his paper. Thank you.
I request our Director Sri H.N. Suresh sir to come on dais and felicitate our His Excellency Archbishop.
It's okay. Respected dignitaries, I am very much humbled today to be in this group of people who are interested in hearing about God experience, and also how perhaps we could impact the lives of others, the existence of others, through our own life, as it were, in some way or other. I belong to the Christian community, and the Christian community, of course, Christianity was born with Christ himself, Jesus Christ, And we believe in what's called the Trinitarian God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it was the Son who came down to earth in order to lift mankind to God Himself. One of our saints, St. Augustine, says, God came to the earth so that He could take man to God Himself. So in that sense, human life has meaning. Human life has a worthy aspect. And more than anything else for us, to be human is also being part of divine. There's a beautiful thought to say that humanity is in some way part of divinity also. The divine elements are in human existence also. And so, perhaps without taking much time, I thought I could give a little experience of our Christian experience, which has got the values of all the other religions, because every religion speaks about God. Every religion speaks about human beings. Every religion speaks about peace and harmony. Every religion speaks about love. And so in that extent, as it were, we are all connected with each other. Perhaps the Hindu religion, the Islam religion, the Baha'i religion, the Zoroastrian religion, the Buddhists, everyone has got their eyes, or perhaps the eyesight, fixed on God and the spiritual matters. And therefore today, perhaps, as I give the experience of, you have taken beautifully Santhavani, the lives of saints or the experience of saints, and India is a land of saints and sages. And therefore, every saint is connected to us because of his spirituality, because of his divine elements as such. And so from the Christian point, I thought I could speak about the Christian saints, not all of them, but just about 4 or 5, to give an essence of what we believe in our saintliness or the divinity of God Himself. It seems there was a group of children who are taken by the teacher to the smaller places in that town, and she took them to the temple, she took them to a mosque, she took them to a church and many other places. And when they came back, these were small children. The teacher is supposed to have asked, children, you went round so many places, you went round the temple, and you saw many things in that. You saw the beautiful pictures of the saints or godly persons. You saw the windows, or what we call the stained glass windows, which had also certain pictures. And there were so many other things that you saw today. And so I want to ask you a question. Who are the saints? Who are the saints or saintly persons? There's one child who remembered and said that she had seen a picture of saint perhaps somewhere on the window, but a stained glass window. And she could not say that this saint, that saint. And being small, she could not identify the saint himself. But then she gave an answer which was a very thoughtful one. The stained glass allows the light in different shades or different colors to come in. And so she said, saints are those who allow heavenly light to pass through. To heavenly light to pass through. I think that's a good definition of a saint. A saint is one who allows the heavenly light to pass through to us. And so perhaps we can always take inspiration from saints and sages. I was just coming, I saw a big billboard there, I think tomorrow's program of the Sai Baba, somewhere in the town. And a beautiful word that was written there, the hands that hold are much more holier than the hands that are joined in prayer. Surely prayer is very good. Prayer elevates us to God Himself. But at the same time, what's the use of our prayer? What's the use of our devotions if we can't help each other, if we can't support each other, if we can't console each other? I think that is also needed. You know, we in our Christian tradition, we say that religion has two sides of the coin. The one coin is God Himself, the one side is God Himself. The other side is the humanity, or the neighbor, we call it, the other persons. What's the use of my joining my hands and perhaps praising God if I have nothing to do with my next door neighbor? That is also important for us. And so, my dear friends, I would just sort of take you to my small. We say, who is a saint? You know, as I said, the definitions of saints are many, and perhaps in every tradition, in every religious tradition, we have the different sort of aspects or conceptions of the saint itself. And in Christianity, we have more than 10,000 saints. We call it recorded saints as such. Unrecorded, we say everyone who is in heaven is a saint. But the ones who have been recognized by the church or perhaps by us, we say that perhaps 10,000 saints are there. And most of the saints, consolation for us, they were not big people, they were not holy people, but they were ordinary people. And ordinary people like us, and perhaps as being ordinary, their life is counted by the extraordinary things that they did. They did the same things, ordinary things, in an extraordinary way. That is why we call them saints. They dedicated their lives in the loving pursuit of God. Many devoted themselves to the service of the poor, sick, and marginalized. And almost all of them are known for their humility and simplicity. In the Christian church, we have a sort of not everyone can become a saint or be declared a saint. There's a difference, as I said, between becoming a saint. We say all those who are in heaven are saints. But to be declared a saint, there are 4 steps or 4 level of steps, as it were. It's called the process of canonization. The word canon means to make it official. So first we call it the servant of God. So when a person who is a holy person who dies, at least we take 5 years time to dissolve, or rather to spread his memory, and we call him a servant of God. A servant is an initial investigation by the local bishop, and after a minimum waiting period of 5 years, the case is sent to Rome and the candidate is given the title of servant of God, Devara Sevaka, Devara Sevaki. The second step is called a little higher step. The Vatican congregation makes a thorough study of the persons, their writings, their reputation, and the Pope declares them as venerable. The third step is called the blessed, or beatification we call it. For this we need a miracle. In fact, to become a saint in our tradition, you need 2 miracles. And miracles, extraordinary happenings that don't happen normally. A cancer patient has been detected. By the intercession of this particular saint, the cancer goes away. These doctors have no explanation how the cancer went away. Or perhaps a person who is called dead or half dead or paralyzed gets up. And therefore, this kind of miracles we speak of. There are blessed and the sainthood. These are the 2 miracles that we think of. The normal people, or rather, we always think of Mother Mary as one of our saints, and she's the Mother of God, Mother of Jesus. And Mary exemplifies perfect faith, humility, and obedience to God's will, her yes to becoming the Mother of God. She remains central to the Catholic devotion, particularly to the rosary. We Christians say the rosary, japamale or japasara, like your beads that you gave me just now beautifully. The beads are counted as we say our prayers, the Hail Mary, Holy Mary. And due to her role in salvation history and her unique holiness, Mary is considered the Queen of Heaven, reigning over all the saints and angels. We also speak about Saint Joseph, the father of Jesus, the foster father of Jesus, and patron saint of workers. Saint Joseph was supposed to have been a carpenter. And a carpenter today or those days, it was a low job, a lowly paid job, and perhaps a discriminated type of people were carpenters. But then, as a humble carpenter, in fact, the May 1st is celebrated as May Day, and it goes to a little of a Christian tradition because the Workers' Day. And we call Saint Joseph the patron of the workers as such, and known for his extraordinary humility, faithfulness, and trust in God's plan, despite life's uncertainties. He protected the Holy Family with quiet dignity. We have also the other saints like St. Peter and Paul, who are considered, as Jesus had 12 apostles, close apostles, and of them we mention all the apostles, of course, but mostly Peter and Paul. They are considered as the pillars of the church, apostolic pillars. St. Peter was the first martyr and patron of popes, and he was a fisherman. St. Paul was formerly a persecutor, one who persecuted but transformed his life and became a disciple of Christ. We have also the other saints like Augustine. Augustine's 300 BC, which means it's almost 1800 years. He is still remembered for his beautiful sayings, books, teachings, etc. One of his sayings is, "Our hearts are restless, and they shall rest only when they rest in you, in God. Our hearts are restless, and they shall rest only when they rest in God." Like these beautiful sayings are there. St. Thomas Aquinas is considered a philosopher saint by us, and also St. Francis of Assisi, whom I'll reference, and St. Teresa of Lisieux. St. Joan of Arc is considered as one of the lady soldiers, at a time when ladies were not going to battle or something like that. This lady is considered as a model for especially young girls to be brave, to fight against the evil, to fight against perhaps the influences of evil as such. And now I take 5 saints, just an example of our Christian, what we call saintology. And as I said, there are 10,000 saints, but then I just take 5 that perhaps might interest some of us because they are special to us and they are all special to the world also. The first is St. Francis of Assisi. You may have heard, the Pope Francis and also our Pope Leo and the others also make a lot of noise about what we call Assisi. Assisi is a city in Europe where St. Francis was born, but he changed the whole history of not only that state of Assisi, the town of Assisi, but also changed the whole geography and the climate or the ecology of the whole world. He is called an ecological saint because he speaks of birds, he speaks of moon, he calls sun my brother, moon my sister, and so in this way he covers and he captures the world as such. But this man, there are different states in his life. The first one, his early life was a boisterous life, wealth and indulgence. The second one was the encounter with Jesus, and he's supposed to have met Jesus in the form of a beggar. He was so much impressed. He tried to help the beggar, not knowing that he was Jesus himself, but then the beggar is the one who led him to his true encounter with God Himself. Embrace poverty and service, and also legacy of a spiritual type that he got. So St. Francis of Assisi, we say his transformative journey, born in a wealthy family but indulge in lavish lifestyle. His profound encounter with a beggar led him to abandon his goods and embrace a life of Christian poverty. He took up a symbolic habit. Habit is something like, so I'm wearing a white one, but the real habit is like a sackcloth that is wound on you. And in Europe, where Assisi Francis was born, it was very cold, and therefore he put this sackcloth, which was considered a cloak, and that cloak was tied with 3 knots. You see the 3 knots there, and those 3 knots represent poverty, chastity, and obedience for Francis. St. Francis, the peace mission, in those years, 12, 19, you can imagine. We are now fighting among ourselves. We are so suspicious among ourselves. But he daringly make a trip to the Middle East to make peace with Sultan al-Kamil, demonstrating his commitment to dialogue and conflict. That time he was called a fool to go to that end, and in order to make peace and this one, because we Christians and Muslims were at that time in what's called a crusade period, wherein we were fighting with each other or perhaps destroying each other also. But St. Francis is supposed to have been very much touched with the poverty of Jesus, the poor being of Jesus. And so the Christmas that we see today, the Christmas crib we call it, where Jesus is born and the shepherds, etc., was started first by Francis of Assisi. And he is the one who gave shape to this, to say that ultimately he said Jesus has to be recognized as a person, as a lover of the poor. Because he was born as a poor. He was born in what we call the cowshed. He was born in a stable, and therefore it starts our Christian history. Our story starts from the crib, from the cowshed, as it were. And that is why the first nativity scene is important. Saint Francis also is supposed to have received what's called the stigmata. Stigmata are those sort of wounds, figures of the wounds that come on the hand, on the feet, etc. And he just had it. Of course, he suffered a lot. It was more painful. But then he is supposed to have, like Jesus who had the nail marks on his hands and legs, so also this man is supposed to have. He founded the Franciscan order. St. Francis is remembered now as a votary for peace. As a votary for peace. Because everywhere where peace and reconciliation is spoken of, especially among the religions, St. Francis is spoken of, because he says, yes, my religion is important. My religion for me is important, but then I have to listen to the others. I have also to make peace with the others. And in this way, he was a votary for peace. He was a champion of ecology. 4th of October is kept up in many places as the day of environment, and therefore ecology. And finally, he was a friend of the poor, always identifying himself with the poor. My second saint I have taken as Mother Teresa, Blessed Mother Teresa, whom you know very well. She was born in Albania, but at the age of 18, she was dying, as it were, to go to India and other places where the poor were there. I want to serve the poor. And where is Albania? And where is perhaps India? But before she went to India, in order to come to India, she had to learn English. She had to be part of a community, a congregation, and that's why she joined what's called the Loreto Sisters and worked for many years in England. But then, due to the political situation there, we will be very sad to hear that she could never go back to her house. Could never go back to her country, because Albania, one of the East communist countries, and England, one of the developed countries were always suspicious of each other, and Mother Teresa was not allowed to come back because they thought she would be a spy for England as such, and therefore she had to sacrifice her own parents, mother. She could not even go for the death of her mother and the other families. And not only that, she is supposed to have what is called uh, a call within a call. When she was in Calcutta, she was transferred to Calcutta and she was with the Loreto sisters there, one of the good schools of the Christian communities run by the Loreto sisters, but educating surely the good ones and the little able ones. But then Mother Teresa found herself very much at odds to say that I am surrounded with poverty on all sides. How would I live in this atmosphere where there is everything nice, of course, but then my heart is with the poor? And that is why the superiors of hers perhaps must have noticed this restlessness, her, and they said, why don't you go for a retreat? Perhaps in the retreat you can clarify many of your doubts with God, with your spiritual director. And she went for the retreat as such. And they say, a call within a call. Mother Teresa calls this a call within a call, a conversion within a conversion. And therefore, she said, I am a Loreto sister with a habit, etc. But now I would like to go to the poor. It was not understood. She was misunderstood. But then, alone, she walks out of the convent, takes up the habit, or rather the dress of the poor, a white sari with three stripes of the blue stripes representing Mother Mary, etc. And therefore she starts her life with radical charity and radical closeness to the poor. Many not helped her, many tried to help her, but in the beginning she was misunderstood, and in fact she was suspected that what is she trying to do? Why she is not happy here? But then Mother Teresa, being a Mother Teresa, she said, my heart cries out for the poor. In the beginning, she went begging, literally begging for her in order to look after her initial patients, the people who were close to her, babies, the sick, etc. There's an incident that is repeated, which I read in one of our books, that Mother Teresa one day went for begging. And when she went to begging from perhaps place to place and shop to shop, there's one man who spat on her, on her palm as it were. Mother Teresa takes it and says, this is for me, but give something for my children. Give something for my children. So that was her spirit. Because Mother Teresa today is remembered as one of the great ladies with Bharat Ratna and Nobel Prize, etc. But she went an agonizing past. She made her traditional vows, and one of the vows that she took was, we religious, we take 3 vows, which we call poverty, chastity, and obedience to our superior. And Mother Teresa takes the 4th vow, love for the poor. Love for the poor. And therefore, dignity and love for the poor was also one of the things that she considered herself a beggar, begging for beggars. B. A beggar begging for beggars. That is what she defined herself, and that is what she meant. Mother Teresa, as you know, she started houses for the dying, orphanage for children, mobile clinics, school for education, etc. And most of these institutions, as it were, are still with us. And her mission expanded from India. When she started, she had only about 6 followers. They became 18, and now there are more than 4,000 sisters all over the world. Mother Teresa's sisters, they call him. Mother Teresa, as I said, the 13 founding members and 4,000 houses, and she's remembered for her compassion, for her love for the poor, known as Angel of Mercy, Angel of Compassion. My 3rd saint I'm just rushing because I know that I'm given just 1 hour time for this one. My third saint is a very young and perhaps a strange saint, because there is an impression that the young people cannot become saints. You have to become old, you have to have the beard, you have to look very saintly, and there is one. But this saint defies our definition of a saint. He was a young man. He died at the age of 15. Died at the age of 15. And therefore, perhaps his name is Carlo. Carlo is Charles Acutis, is a teenage model of sanctity and celebrated for his profound faith and his pioneering use of digital mode to promote digital media to promote religious values and devotion. You can imagine digital, which is considered sometimes dangerous, so on and so on. But this particular young man says that the digital value, the digital world has got much to offer to us also. And raised in Milano, that's Italy, Carlo developed an early passion for computers and video games, and he taught himself programming and web design, actively assigning his parish and school with various digital projects. He died, he was born on 3rd May 1991. He died at the age of 15 in 206, and he was canonized this year. The first saint canonized by Pope Leo, the new Pope, was this particular saint just 2-3 months ago. And therefore, he becomes the first saint of this millennium, as it were. Carlo was very good in what we call, he took it as a passion to document the miracles, the religious miracles, the Christian miracles that had taken place, and see that what was special about each of these miracles. He was also a lover of Mother Mary, fond of Mother Mary and the saints. Unfortunately, at the age of 12, he gets what's called the blood cancer, leukemia, and he's dying, but then always cheerful. Even at that moment of his death, he asked his mother, "Why are you crying?" "Because I am happy, I am happily returning to God." And this is the way perhaps he sort of encourages his own people to accept final illness and peaceful acceptance. And early October 2006, he develops a severe inflammation of the throat, and despite worsening of the pain, he faced his illness with profound peace and yeah. Yeah, he dies at the age of 15, and he is declared a saint now of the Catholic Church and made a patron, or what we call a model for the youth as such. I take another saint. You have heard of the Jesuits. Here in Bangalore, we have the St. Joseph's College and many other Jesuit education. Many of our students are studying in these colleges, etc. So the Jesuit. And the founder of the Jesuits, a very strange combination and a strange, perhaps, I would say, a phenomenon that a person who could not even write and read, and perhaps was this one, is considered a saint today and a founder of a big congregation called the Jesuit congregation. He was, as a young man, he was an ambitious and crazy soldier. A crazy soldier. From a young age, Ignatius, the word ignis in Latin means fire. A fire. That means a man with fire in his heart. Was keen for military exercises and driven by a desire for fame. He joined the army at the age of 17, patterning the life on the stories of knights and chivalry. In 1509, he took up arms for the Duke Antonio Maric de Lara, and at the Battle of Pamplona, some of the saints start with failures. Many don't start with success. And Saint Ignatius had a grievous wound at the Pamplona, War of Pamplona, and he loses his leg. He considers this madness, and he wants to come back to life and once again be a general of the army as such. But then the doctors told him, you cannot. This is a grievous wound and you cannot come. But then God leads him through his wound in order to become a saint. He accepts it. And in the beginning, though he curses God, he never believed in God first. But then when he started believing God, he curses God. Why did you make me like this? And it seems he started reading what's called the lives of saints. The lives of saints themselves. And there was an inspiration in his head. Why can't I become a saint? How do I become a saint? And that is how in him was born this desire in order to be saint. St. Ignatius, while recovering, his sister-in-law brought him the lives of Christ and the life of the saints, and these books would influence the whole life as such. And later on, he founded his society, which called in the beginning with just 3 persons, and one of them was called St. Francis Xavier. You may remember that we Christians go quite often to Goa. In Goa is what we call the mortal remains of St. Francis Xavier. In the basilica, they are called, they're kept on top. And St. Francis Xavier belonged to this order of the Jesuits, as it were. And once again, the Francis also was a little cracked type, having dreams and his own visions, as it were. And by that time, St. Ignatius of Loyola had converted himself. And he was watching this young man, Francis, much younger in age, of course. But then he was going about. And he was so happy as if there is nothing in the world to be this one. And he tells St. Francis of Xavier one sentence that converts St. Francis of Assisi. And the sentence is, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? Many of us are trying to gain the whole world. But some of us are losing our souls as such. And that is the beautiful experience to say that one word or one sentence converts St. Francis of Assisi. So with this, perhaps St. Francis of Xavier came to India, and he also is considered a great saint for us. The motto of the Jesuits, the Jesuit fathers and the Jesuit congregation is very simple. In Latin, they call it ad maiorem Dei gloriam. For everything for the greater glory of God. Anything that I do, there is one measure. There is one bottle or one, perhaps, you can liter bottle that you can use. The only measure that I can say is, if it is for the greater glory of God, I go. I give in. But if it is not for the greater glory of God, perhaps I am hitting my rock, as it were, hitting my head against a rock, nothing will happen. So therefore, the greater glory of God is important. My last saint is also an Indian saint, what we call Kuriakose Elias Shavara. You have heard of the Christ College in Bangalore, the Christ institutions in Bangalore. So the founder of the Christ institution is Saint Kuriakose Elias. He's also a very interesting person because, of course, Christ has developed a lot now, but the founding story is a different one. Born on February 10th, 1805 and ordained as a priest in 1829, he passed away 3rd January 1871. Kuriakose Elias Shavara was an Indian Catholic priest, as a religious leader, philosopher, and a social reformer. He was the first canonized saint of the Indian origin and a member of the Syro-Malabar Church. Pope Francis canonized him on 23rd of November 2014. Kuriakose was born to Shavara and Mariam Topil, as it were. Saint Kuriakose, from a very young age, he felt drawn to a monastic life, and along with some other priests, he founded the monastic order, the Servants of Mary, the servants of Mary Immaculate and was elected as the first prior general. Something touching about him is, he was the first one who opened a school for the untouchables. Although he came from a Syrian Christian family, Syrian Christian family is considered a higher edge, as it were. But then Shavara was the first Indian Christian to bravely admit untouchables into schools. Which means when you bring those times when they brought the intouchables, the other ones just walked away. They didn't go, but he didn't mind because he said, my mission is for these. And he also opened up an institution for Sanskrit studies in those age. Perhaps we Christians, may not have shown much interest in Sanskrit, but then this is the man who told us that the roots of India are in the Sanskrit traditions. And and he published Sanskrit education. He providing Sanskrit education to the people of lower caste and directly challenging the social bias as such. He was instrumental in establishing what's called Palli Kudam. Palli means the temple. Kudam means the house, as it were. The schools next to the church, next to the temple. So because we said that this goes along. Inasmuch as the spiritual enlightenment is given in the churches, in the temples, the enlightenment of the world is given in our schools, and that is also important. And so he played a great role in starting midday meals for the programs. He understood the need of the people. The midday meals was not started today and these days, but started in those days in the 18th century in order to encourage the children to come to the schools. And in this way, he provided the best of education, tried to provide the education to the Dalits and poor people as such. Kuriakose introduced also what's called Pidiyari. That's a handful of rice. He encouraged the Christians that every day when you go to eat, when you go for lunch, take one handful, keep it separately. And on Sunday when you come for the Mass, bring this handful of rice that has been collected, give it to the church so that the church can give it to the other poor people. Kuriakose also started the third printing press, not the first one, the third printing press in Kerala, and the paper that's called Deepika, which is even now going on, was started by him. Meaning to say he understood that printing technology or perhaps philosophy to say that the printing can make a lot of impression and also a lot of service to the people. He also founded the Congregation of Carmelites and the others, women congregations, that is one. Finally, he was a family man, a man of the family. What do you mean by man of the family? That he encouraged the family traditions, that the family who stays together, prays together, a family that prays together always stays together. And therefore he said that a good Christian family is the image of heaven. Those of us who have not seen heaven, perhaps when you see a good family, a happy family, is as good as you have experienced a bit of heaven in our own life. So, my dear friends, I close with this. The saints of today are the living examples inspiring us for virtue and faith-filled lives amid modern challenges and certainties. The saints of today, or the saints of the church, are also a living heritage. They pass through, they allow the light of the spiritual light or the heavenly light to pass through from heaven to the earthly mode. And the consoling thing for us is the saints are ordinary people, but people of hope, people who have struggled, people who have suffered, but at the same time believed in God. So I leave you at this. I thank you very much for this occasion that is given to me. God bless you.
thank you, Your Excellency, for that message filled with warmth, dignity, and divine compassion. Our next session brings us the message of Islam, one of peace, surrender, and brotherhood. It is our privilege to welcome Shri Umar Teekay, MD, Teekays Interior Solutions, Bengaluru, an inspiring speaker and contributor to interfaith harmony. Sir, we request you to share your insights with us. Umar Teekay has come with his wife, Dr. Zubeda. We will also welcome her too. I request my colleague Sri Prakash Kamath to come on the dais and give a brief introduction about Teekays.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all. It's my pleasure to give a brief introduction of Shri Umar Teekay. Shri Umar Teekay, a distinguished businessman and community leader based in Bangalore, is the founder of Teekays Group, a diversified enterprise engaged in interior fit-out solutions, land development, and allied services across Karnataka. An alumnus of NIT Teekays Surathkal in mechanical engineering with a postgraduate diploma in management from Bangalore and the owner-president management program at Harvard Business School, he has twice been honored as NIT Teekays most distinguished alumnus. Beyond business, Mr. Teekay has played a pivotal role in the revival of the Berry community through the Berries Welfare Association and heads Teekays Foundation, which supports rural education. He currently serves as the honorary president of the Muslim Educational Institutions Federation, that is MEIF, overseeing nearly 300 schools with over 1 lakh students, for which MEIF has received the Karnataka Rajyotsava Award in 2023. A trustee of Premanjali Foundation, patron of coastal Karnataka's cultural heritage, and recipient of the Karavali Ratna Award in 2024, Mr. Teekay is also a noted speaker, adventurer, and philanthropist. I now request Shri Umar Teekay to present his paper. Thank you.
I request our director, Sri H.N. Suresh sir, to come on dais and felicitate our esteemed guest. Thank you, sir. Mr. Umar Teekay, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm extremely glad to be standing on the dais and speaking on the occasion of this well thought about program, Santhavani. And more than that, I'm humbled and overwhelmed with the burden of this responsibility to be counted among distinguished speakers like Reverend Father Peter Machado, and tomorrow Hampana would be speaking about Jainism, and such a lot of scholars. So I would begin with a couple of disclaimers. Number one, I am not a scholar at all by any measure, nor am I an Islamic scholar, to be very precise. And number two, my presentation is not about Santhavani, because there is no concept of sainthood, Father, as you know, in Islam, because it believes that Quran is an all-encompassing, everything comprehensive text by itself, and all the messages are in that. And some of them were interpreted through the lives and sayings of Prophet Muhammad, which are called hadith, which were chronicled much later. And then comes the interpretations and the explanations, which are in terms of volumes written by many people, but everything is rooted either in Quran or in Hadith. These are called tafsirs. These are the only three sources through which we can pass any of our messages. So my number one, I'm not a scholar. Number two, it's not even going to be a presentation like what Father did. I'll be speaking extempore from my heart, and I'll be speaking a lot about Islam and putting the religion in its right perspective. And by no means this is a talk to convince anyone about this faith called Islam, especially in a troubled times like this. So this is not a talk to convince. This is just a talk only to inform. And my last and fifth disclaimer is that I'm not talking from here because I'm a Muslim about Islam. You give me a topic, I'm an voracious reader. I speak more as a student of comparative religious studies. If you had given me a talk about Christianity or Jainism or Buddhism or Gita, I could probably speak extempore for about an hour on all these things, because I have been an voracious reader for many years. With these 5 disclaimers, I'll start my brief. To begin with, I'll begin with a small anecdote, which may sound a bit autobiographical, but it's very important in the context of what I am talking about. I come from a fairly wealthy family in Bangalore, and a religious family. Born a Muslim, brought up as an ardent Muslim. My parents were practicing Muslims, but then they did not fit into today's concept of a fanatic Muslim as such, because they were a very, that is how all the villages then were. My father's best friend, if I can remember, was Vittal Shetty and Dr. Bhaskar Rao, who incidentally was RSS chief of our village, and Father Carvalho of the church. And there are not a day that they did not meet. And my father was a president of a local mosque. And the bond was so tight among them. And my mother was not greatly educated. And we lived in a fairly large mansion in the village. And our next door neighbor was a goldsmith's family, very modest family. And the lady of the house was called Sushilakka. And Sushilakka and my mother were very thick friends, no status, no religious barriers, nothing came between them. And the whole village then, an Achari's wife was called Acharti, which was not a very respectable term, but that is how they were addressed in third party and in second party too. But our Amma had taught us, saying that even in third party, we were not allowed to call her Acharti. We had to call only her as Amma. Amma Bandru, Amma Hodru, that was the thing. So that is an atmosphere with which I grew up. And like every child in an Muslim community goes, we all go to a madrasa. And unfortunately, the concept of madrasa is not what is being propagated, and where terrorism originates, kind of a thing. Madrasa is a temple, 4 walls, where there is a very modestly paid Maulana teaches you simply how to read Quran, not even the meanings of Quran. He teaches you how to recite Quran, because it is essential to practice your prayers. And practicing prayer is a compulsory thing, 5 times prayer. And how do you pray? And how do you give your charity in zakat, or how do you fast? These are the simple things. Every child around the world will go through this much of an Islamic education. My children did not have an access to a local mosque, so a Maulana would come home and teach, and that's all they would teach. But then I was more than an average student, and all this madrasa education happens between your 1st standard and 10th standard, and then you part ways in the village. And during then, it's in the evening or in the morning, any one of the time, half an hour to 1 hour is where you go to this madrasas to recite Quran, kind of a thing. But I was ahead of my time. So I took a little more interest even getting into the meanings of Quran. So the big priest of the mosque took a personal interest in me, and he started telling me the meanings of Quran, and that was my undoing. As long as I didn't understand Quran, it's all fine. So, and then I went to Suratkal Engineering College, and by the time I went into the college, I had developed a total aversion for Islam. And there was, I was not an atheist. I was developed a total aversion for religion itself. I was not an atheist, but definitely an agnostic person. And, the rituals and the beliefs sounded so blind to me, did not fit into my scientific temperament. And those days, there was no Bible, no Gita, no Quran. For me, there's one book that I revered was Mario Puzo's mafia story, Godfather. I used to sleep it under my pillow, and I used to write a bold thing. If he had come to my room then, make him an offer that he cannot refuse. In mafia language, you know what is making an offer, right? Yeah, I said that if I only know in life what offer to make in a situation, there is nobody can beat me. All I need to know is just this one message. And then I was also socially a very active student, a responsible student. I got, as they said that many times, the best outgoing student award culturally, and I was in debate, elocution, quiz, and all this. And I came across this professor called Professor Umar Gajendragad. All of you would have heard this name, a big scholar. He finally ended up as a Vice Chancellor of Coimbatore University. He was a professor of chemistry. There was nothing much. I was a mechanical engineering student, but we would encounter each other in the social gatherings, in the debate forum, etc. And during these conversations, in some of the frank conversation, I told him how I hate religion, how I have no faith at all, and how I am turning away from Islam, kind of a thing. And he tried his best to give me a bit of conviction and convincing talks. And then finally one day he said that, Umar, I respect you a lot. And I also know that you're an voracious reader. Meet me one of these days. And Father, I didn't even know that he was a Muslim professor. His name was a kind of a misleading thing, M.R. Gajendragad. His actual name was Mohinuddin Rahmatullah Gajendragad. And when I came to know that he was a Muslim, I developed a bit more nervousness because I had told him so much about anti-Islamic things. And then he calls me to his room, and then he told me that I'll give you a book. I want you to read. And my expectation was that this book would be towards understanding Islam. This is what we give it to every youngster who's turning away from Islam. It's a brilliant book, puts Islam in its right perspective, how Islam should be understood. Or there is another brilliant book called Etiquettes in Islam, and which is another beautiful book. The more you read, you fall in love. A lot of you would be wondering where Muslim and where etiquettes, because that's not what we see practicing in the lower strata, right? Well, that is another brilliant book, but I didn't tell him that I know about this book, so I was expecting him to give one of these books. So I go to his room one sultry, summer afternoon, and I get, I get very emotional. Because this was a life-changing moment for me. He gives me a brown envelope, a sealed envelope, and he says that open and see. This is a book. And sir, the book that he gave me was Bhagavad Gita by Rajaji. And my first thought was a traitor, young guy, impressionable age, 19, 20 years. I said that a Muslim guy trying to sell a Hindu book to a Muslim. This is the first thought that would come. And then I just opened the book. It's a tattered pages. It told me that he has read it multiple times. And then he had made many comments on that in green and red. And he said, be very careful with this book, Umar. This is my personal valuable copy. I want you to read this. And then I took it, and I had no interest in reading that. Why would I read a book? Because I had still Godfather intact with me. And he would ask me every week after week that I go, and he'll tell me, Umar, did you read the book? I'll say, no, sir, I'll start. And then finally, out of sheer pressure from him, I started reading this book. Initially, it was a little difficult. But as I started going along, I started getting drawn so deeply into it. And it became a mesmerizing thing for me. I could not put that book down. For maybe 3 months, 4 months, I kept reading it. I started making my own notes by the side. And the pearls of wisdom, the beauty of its language, everything was so impressive. But I must admit that I was impressed, yes, but I was not convinced. It actually left me with more questions than answers. I mean, every time I would read, I said that, why is this so? Is this really necessary? Is this really dharma? Is a violence required? Is this the only way? At one point, I even started thinking that how is it different from my godfather? Godfather also tells you in very simple ways how to practice violence in order to accumulate wealth in a mafia language. And here is a circuitous way of telling that go through violence to reclaim your kingdom. I said, where is dharma in this? But it's beautiful all the same. So that is when I started interacting with the professor. And evenings after evenings that we would spend time with him, and then he went very patiently explaining the matter to me. And at the end of the day, that whole concept of dharma became very clear to me. I mean, for all of us, especially the young children, dharma is loosely translated as religion. We say that Hindu dharma, Muslim dharma, Christian dharma. But, when you get into that, it can get into a depth of an ocean. And it can have an encompassment of the entire universe. That one simple word called dharma. A Kshatriya dharma, a Brahmana dharma, a Vyagra dharma, or even a Scorpion's dharma. The concept of a dharma, once it becomes clear, a lot of things falls in place. And this is when he dropped the second biggest bomb in my life. And he says, now read Quran, Umar. I said, Professor, I have read it many times. I'm almost getting here initiated into Hindu dharma. And here is a man who tells me that now read Quran. I said, I have read it many times and I don't think I have left anything. I have studied it very deeply. He said, no, read it again now. And I went back to my Quran. And days on I was reading, and each verse, each chapter as I go along started sounding entirely different to me. And then I was wondering, is this the same Quran that I read for almost 10 years, 15 years, and developed a hatred? Because every word meant an entirely a different thing. And this is where I want to put across to you a concept of listening. We say that listen to a communication. We use loosely word, and we think that hearing is listening. And in management, we say that there are 3 positions from which you can listen. One is a position called I know, I know. If someone was to give a talk here on architecture or interior decoration or mechanical engineering, I would sit there and listen to it from a position of I know, because I know architecture and I know that I know architecture. And the second position, even a little better position, is called I know, I don't know. Like when Father was speaking about this, I would sit there and listen, because Father is talking about the saints, however much I have read. These are certain things I know that I don't know. Or if someone is giving me a talk on quantum physics or astrophysics or microbiology, I would sit there and listen from a position I know that I don't know. So it's a little better thing. A lot of things would come. When I sit as I know, it's a biased mind. I already know, I'm listening from that point. But the third and the most important point where you can stand and listen is that I don't know, I don't know. If I have to ask an example, what subject, and if you can give me an answer, it would not fall in that, because you should not even know that you don't know. And most of the management classes teach us saying that stand in that position and listen. And this time I was reading my Quran from that position. I don't know, I don't know that. And in fact, I was reading, Father, this gentleman called Arvind Chokhadi. Arvind Chokhadi is a scholar and a writer and a teacher. A lot of you would know. And he had written a small article in which he says, a Muslim lady asks him, Chokadi sir, I want to know about Sanatana Dharma, and can you recommend a book to me? And he writes to her saying that, look lady, if you want to learn about Sanatana Dharma, you are likely to get caught in the quagmire of the words and its simple meanings. If you want to really understand the metaphor of Sanatana Dharma, then what you should be doing, understand a bit about the basis. The 4 Vedas you should know. The Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. And not only that, you also know that each of the Veda is divided in 4 sections. I'm just quoting him. He's saying that it is, what's it called? Sanhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishads. You should know a bit. If nothing else, at least sit with somebody who knows about that, listen to him, prepare yourself, and then go and attempt. And then I can tell you what book to read. And that is when these metaphors in the context will make sense to you. Without that, if you start making an attempt to read any of the vachanas of a grantha, what would happen is that there is a danger of you getting entangled in the quagmire of the verbal meaning of those words, and then you will start interpreting it in a wrong way. Now here I was reading now Quran in the newly acquired light of what I understood from Gita and what Dharma is all about, and then every action that suggests in Quran started making sense to me. Now you must be wondering, I'm supposed to be speaking about Islam, why am I speaking about Gitas and Vedas and all that? Because this is what initiated me into Quran, so I thought that I'll begin with that. And then he talked to me also about the importance of religion in one's life. This was the biggest lesson that he gave me, and I did not look back after that. And he told me that religion is your fundamental intellectual core. If you're born in a religion and if you're brought up in a particular religion, that forms your core. And you can't go against that core. It is like your family, your origin, your parents, your community, your land, your religion. These are unshakable faiths. And I think that you all know this famous quote by Swami Chinmayananda. I had a privilege of listening to him live on the Malleshwaram grounds in the late 70s and 80s. And he gives a beautiful definition of sin, Father. He says, sin is nothing but that action of yours which goes against your intellectual conviction. He says that there is an intellectual core to you. It's a conscious, simply put. And he says that what is sin for a Brahmin need not be a sin for a Muslim or a Christian. Eating meat goes against the intellectual conviction of a Brahmin because that is what he is brought up with. And it need not be a sin for a Muslim or a Christian. So this was a concept of thing what he said. And then Professor Gajendra Gad told me that every religion has to have 5 parts. The basic of a religion is a philosophy. That's a fundamental belief of that religion. This is called the philosophy. And in order to get that philosophy reinforced, you have the mythology, which are the Puranas. Philosophy is Upanishads. And then you have the Puranas coming in. And then you have the rituals. You need to practice in a particular way because any number of times that you read, it will not reinforce you. And these rituals are coming through Vedas. And then comes the code of ethics, which is nothing but Gita in Hinduism. And then comes your spiritualism. When all this happens, you embrace peace. That is what, Father, I think it was Saint Augustine saying, my heart is in turmoil, but it will rest only when I rest in you. And that you is not outside, that you is in your fundamental core. When you are rested there, when you are at peace with that core, through a religion, that is where religion becomes important because that's a vehicle. Unless you have any other vehicle of reaching there, I have no argument with you. But if you do not have, religion is an easiest vehicle that can put you in touch with that and put you at peace. And Islam, incidentally, is derived from the word salam. Salam means peace. It is not the peace in a very general terms, like all Islamic terms. This is a very wide-ranging word, like dharma's meaning. Salam means peace. It's about peace with your creator, peace with the nature, peace with yourself, peace with your neighbor, peace with generally everybody, peace with your ultimate core. And when you have touched that, you say that that is when your fulfillment starts happening. That is a spiritual experience that you should do. But then what happens is that very often we get stuck in the ritual, or we get emotional about the Puranas or the mythology. And then that is where all the fight starts. Because ultimately, if you look at the fundamental belief of Islam is a total surrender, be in peace with yourself. And when you are surrendered yourself totally, this is what you said, Father, the four things, the poverty, the chastity, and surrender, right? It is a surrender, or there was a different? Yeah. I mean, I don't think any other religion has got any other philosophy. Once we understand that this is a philosophy, but our mythology can change, our rituals can change, and hence our code of conduct can also differ to an extent. But ultimately, the feeling of spiritualism comes when you, through this, get in touch with your that ultimate core. Now, with this, let me just come to Quran now. This is the basic that I was saying. Now, every religion, I said, that has to have a philosophy, it has to have the mythology, it has to have the rituals, it has to have a code of conduct, and then it has to have a spiritual experience. And Quran is such a book, like Bible, that it doesn't have a separate sections for this. It is an all encompassed into one. And then once you get in touch with, in that I don't know position, or in a contextual forum, or in the light of something that you have learned, or with the faith saying that this cannot be wrong because it has survived for so many years, then it gives you a total different meaning. And you would be mesmerized by its depth and its width and what it keeps telling you. Now, it is just a simple book. It is just a 300 plus pages book. In a small form, you can even put it in your pocket. That's all that is there in that. But each word is so deep, and it has got such a wide explanation and interpretation that you can have. It covers the political science, it covers economics, it covers the warfare, it has got the jurisprudence in that, it has got geography. And then on one side, it can talk a subject like biology and astronomy. On the other side, it can talk about an entirely different thing. All of these things are mixed. It tells you, let's say, on a macro level, it tells you about the astronomy and the secrets of the universe. And on the micro level, it also tells you that how a small drop of a liquid forms into life in very vivid description into a life in a mother's womb, or where that little life gets its sustenance, or a little frog that is hiding in the crevices of an unknown rock gets its sustenance in that. And each word has got an enormous meaning. For instance, on the face of it, it looks very simple, but as you read, the scholars tell us that read Quran at different point in time, depending on your evolution, like it's not just for Quran, for any grantha, depending on your evolution, it's a mirror that you're holding in front. Who you are, that it reflects and puts you at a higher pedestal. And the next time you read, you're looking at yourself from an evolved perspective, and an evolution, and an evolution, and an evolution. It just goes like that. Now, where does it take ultimately when you're going in that kind of a perspective? Each time it gives you a different meaning. For example, Father, there's a simple word called rizq. Rizq is R-I-Z-K. A loose translation in Arabic or Urdu is food. Ahara is called rizq. Nanna rizq elli baradidanta nan gottilla. This is very often a Muslim would say, where my food is, I don't know. But the meaning of that in a different context, it repeats itself in a many number of places, and there are volumes written. Tafsir is what I was talking. Tafsir is a Vyakhana. It's an interpretation, explanation. There are voluminous things written about this, just a simple one word called rizq. And there are books in that Tafsir books, Doctor, you would know. There's a large books. I mean, you will get lost in the quagmire of those things, what's happening inside that. It's a simple book. Or the law of inheritance In Quran, in one chapter, Father, it says in just 6 sentences, just 6 sentences. Today, volumes are written by scholars on that, and there are no contradiction anywhere. This is the beauty of it. There are no contradiction anywhere about these 6 sentences. Now, how many possibilities are there? There are there are millions of possibilities about inheritance. What if the father dies? What if a mother dies? What if you have one child? What if you had a girl? What if you had a cousin? There are number of things, but everyone falls back on those 6 sentences, and they believe that that explains the law of inheritance. Everything that is said about in Islam is a very small, concise thing. But if you really want to delve into the depth of that, it opens up an entirely a different world. And coming to the features of Islam, just understand that Quran was not written by a man, or nor was it revealed. It was revealed to Prophet Muhammad in the form of inspirations, and it came over 23 years. From his 40th year, he said that I have become a prophet. I have become, prophet means nothing but a messenger of God. I have been ordained to send the messages to you. And it came in bits and pieces. And it was not even written during his lifetime. What happens is that he would come and recite, and his power of that conviction was so strong that people started getting it by heart. And before he died, there were at least about hundreds of people who knew Quran verbatim, by script, by everything, and nobody had written it down. Much later, it all got written down in the form of chapters and verses based on their relevance. Now look at this, a chapter called Al-Baqarah, the second chapter, the longest chapter of Quran. A portion of that came when Muhammad was only 40 years. A portion of that came when he was 58 years, 18 years apart. And a portion, it came in different pieces. But nowhere, it is not a written thing. And he was completely an illiterate man who neither knew how to read, write, and there was no reference points for him. And then everything that came from then to here, there was no contradictions anywhere that was happening. And you would not believe, now the Arab Peninsula is from Oman to Jordan on the one side, and then it is I think on the right and the left. It's a very wide peninsula. People talked Arabic in different ways. Like in a small place like Karnataka, Kannada is spoken in a different way. But Quran is found as a source of grammar. Can you believe this? Today, anytime there is a grammatical contradiction, people say that follow Quran. Not even a word would follow out of. In the thing, there was a research. There is only one small word, because Quran has got 114 chapters and about 640 verses, and there are many words. And there is only one simple word. It is like in Hindi, we use ka and ki for striling and pulling, and there is no napunsakalinga in Hindi. So we make that mistake, unless you know Hindi very well. You say that uski gadi. It cannot be uska gadi. And you don't know why a car is a striling, unless you know. So one such small mistake, or the Shakespeare in English, I cannot, how does he stress? With the double negatives, he stresses very often. But Shakespeare is used to be an expert on grammar. So like that, there was one mistake. There was an attempt to correct it. But then they found out that contextually it was right, because that verse was revealed when he was in a particular situation, in a particular geographical location. And in that location, the language was spoken in that order. And then the scholar said that don't touch it. Quran is not touchable. Even that one mistake was not corrected. And look at the kind of some of the miracles, which, a lot of scholars say that don't even speak about it. For instance, the word man and woman, believe me, this has come from his 40th year to his 63rd year, 23 years, came in bits and pieces, not written anywhere. The word man and woman appears 25 times exactly. Man and woman. Or dunya and akhira. Dunya and akhira means this world and the next world, appears 114 times, or I may be wrong in saying it is 115 times, I think. Or life and death, it appears exactly 165 times. And the miracle of the miracle is that the word water and land appears 32 times and 13 times. if you look at the proportion of that, that is the proportion of a land to the water. It is roughly 71% to 29% kind of thing. But then every scholars, I'm sorry for saying this, every scholars have warned us, don't reduce Quran into a book of miracle. It's not a magic book. You like Quran for its wisdom. You don't even talk about that because it's not worth talking. There could be things which are not even matching this. So it's not the whole idea. Now, Quran came to, the first verse of Quran was revealed, called Ikra, in the month of Ramzan. And Ramzan is a month that you all know that we fast. Fasting is a form of our thanksgiving for having guided us in the right path. This is our belief. And what is the right path? What do we do in Ramzan? We fast. Fasting is a process of purification. And if you want to know the true meaning of jihad, that is the meaning of jihad. When you are sacrificing a lot of your inner turmoil and your pleasures and your biases and purify yourself internally, that is called jihad actually. This is in Hinduism or in the textures that we say, Kama, Krodha, Mada, Matsara, Moha, Lobha. You know that when you're fighting with that, that is your jihad. And when you are, and this is a month of sacrifice on one thing. This is a month of also caring and sharing, the Christian way of doing it, because Islam is all about giving and giving and more giving. And at the end of those 30th day, we do Ramzan. It is called Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Adha means a festival of fulfillment, which means that when you have fought that for 30 days, not just by fasting, but also purifying your thought and sacrificing all the worldly pleasure and sharing whatever little that you have with everybody, that is the day you know that you have touched your core, and that is the day you perform your Ramzan, and on that day you cannot fast. It is considered to be a prohibited day. That is a day of rejoice. Now this is about Ramzan. Now let's go to the fundamentals of Islam. Now if you know, Quran begins, the first chapter of Quran is only 10 sentences. It's called Al-Fatiha. And the first 4 sentences, the opening sentence is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah. Allah, incidentally, is not the name of a Muslim God. In Arabic, Allah means Lord, God. You know, it's not an Islamic God. I begin in the name of a Lord who is merciful and compassionate. And then the next 3 sentences, swearing our allegiance to the God, saying that all my credit for anything that I achieve belongs to Him, and He is compassionate and merciful. And the thing is that His judgment is final. So this is a complete surrendering 3 statements which the father was talking about, which everybody talks about, because that is an ultimate surrender when you do. This is exactly karmanya vadikaraste ma phalashu kadashina. This is exactly that. You know, you have a right only to your action and not to its fruits, because your action, if it results in a great thing, the entire credit belongs somewhere else. And then the judgment as to what is right and wrong is not yours. It is somebody else's judgment. Acceptance is the only thing that is there for you. Now, Islam is based on achara and vichara. The vicharas are 6 vicharas. These are the fundamental beliefs of Islam. Every Muslim is supposed to have this belief that there is an Allah, there is a Lord, and there is only one Lord who lords over this world. And then there is a proclamation, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. We say that there is no Lord other than the God Himself, or Muhammad is only His messenger. So this is the first belief. And then second, we believe that there were prophets. Like you said, there were 10,000 saints. Quran says that there were more than 120,000 prophets were sent. Muhammad was the last prophet. All your saints could be our prophets, Father. Rama, Lakshmana, you know, whoever Buddha, Mahavira could be prophets as far as an Islamic thought is concerned. There were prophets who brought the messages, and they brought these messages through the books. You know, like Quran is a book, Bible is a book, we believe in Bible. And Taurat, the Judaism's book, we believe in that book. He says that every time it came through book, Gita could be a book where we believe in. So it came through books. And all this came through angels. Angels are nothing but inspiration. Quran came through Jibreel. and when your death comes, it says that Azrael comes and holds you to death, and then your good and bad is taken care of by certain angels. This is just a faith that you have, that there are angels for every department. And then it says that the good and the bad, everything belongs to him. That is what I said. Every credit goes to him, the judgment is his. That should be your ultimate faith. And the last thing it says, that there is a day of judgment for everything that you've done, karma, everything that you've done, there is a day of judgment. These are the 6 beliefs, and there are 5 actions which every Muslim must go through. Number 1 is that proclamation of the 6 faiths, and trust in that and proclaim it verbatim. Number 2 is that 5 times you pray. This is your ritual. 5 times you pray. It's morning, noon, evening, sunset, and last. It is compulsory. And the third one, the most important, is charity. 2.5% of a man's wealth that accumulates a Muslim's wealth in 1 year must be compulsorily be given. It's a compulsory charity. It's called zakat. And then fasting, which I talked about. The whole of month you fast as a measure of your thanksgiving. And the last one is Hajj. Hajj is a pilgrimage that you conduct and go to Mecca and do certain things. I'll just tell you what we do when we go to Hajj. And that is meant for, if you can afford it physically and resourcefully, you can afford it, then you go for Hajj. Now, coming back to the history of Islam, Islamic is an Abrahamic religion, like Christianity, Judaism. We believe that everything began with Adam, and then much later Abraham came. Abraham was an embodiment of this total surrender, and God would come. This is a mythology of thing. Do we believe in that? Yes, I believe in that. Do we have to believe in that? I don't care, because this strengthens your belief. I told you, mythology is there to strengthen your philosophy. And it strengthens the philosophy because he was an ultimate man who surrendered. He had a son called Ismail, whom he loved through his beloved wife called Azra. And one day God comes to him and he says that, do you love me? Yes, I love you. Okay, so then you're going to sacrifice your son and your wife. And he goes and leaves them in the middle of a desert, and then with a pail of water, and the water lasts not even a day. And he goes back, and that child, out of sheer thirst, starts wailing so uncontrollably. The mother starts walking up and down between 2 hills. They're called Safa and Marwa. She walks up and down crying for attention, and nothing happens. And at one point, the child stops crying, and she thinks that everything is over. But when she comes, miracle had happened, because the child kept tapping its feet, and from there a spring rose, which we call as Zamzam. Even today, Zamzam in the middle of Mecca is there as a well, and we believe that it's a miracle well, because at any given time in Mecca, for a pilgrimage, there are about 25 lakhs people on a given day. During Hajj time, it goes up to 40-50 lakhs. And everyone drinks from that well, plus they carry cans and cans of water to their places. Not just that, that water gets pumped to almost 450 miles away to Medina, and there also the water is used, and it has never dried, and people have done a lot of tests on the water, 20 years, 25 years. I mean, it could be a simple scientific reason, but we believe that this is what happened. And later, Abraham, he rejoins with his family, because that place, because where there is a water, people start congregating there. Makkah becomes a small town where the merchants started coming. And then when his son grows up to a small child, he gets this dream again about total surrender. He says that, do you love your son? If you love your son, sacrifice him in my name. And he carries that little child over the place. He goes to Mina and Muzdalifah and Arafah. There are different places. And finally, he comes to a place where he was about to sacrifice. And the story says that by miracle, miraculously, the child escaped and a goat came in its place. That is why it's called Bakrid, Bakra, Eid. And this is where we celebrate. There are only 2 festivals, Ramzan at the end of that 30 days of Ramzan, and Eid, Bakrid, at the end of this. And this is what we do in Hajj. This is a ritual that Muhammad said. He said that you've got to believe. If your fundamental belief of total surrender has to succeed, you've got to believe in the mythology of what happened with Ibrahim, and you've got to follow his path. When we go to Hajj, a lot of people would know, what do these people do in Hajj? When we go to Hajj, we stay in the camp called Mina. That is where Abraham stayed with this little child, contemplating what he should do. And then he walks to a place called Muzdalifah, and he sleeps over that night. And then the next day, as he was walking, he gets a thought, is this really God speaking to me, or it's the devil? And he throws those stones to shooing away devil. And that's what we do when we go there. And then finally he ends up, sacrificing a goat. Of course, today I was reading in a WhatsApp, a friend of mine asked, he says that I read it somewhere that when you go to Hajj, I believe every Muslim passes through a tunnel. At the end of that, there is a chunk of meat hanging and you've got to bite it and come back. I said, is that true? I said, no. This is basically a thing that we practice, what Abraham did many years ago in his quest to totally surrender to God. And that's a mythology that we believe in. And that strengthens my faith, and that's the reason that we go to Hajj. Now coming to Quran itself. Why Quran and how do we follow Quran? Because it's a complex test. And Quran, if you have to understand, you have to understand the lives and the sayings of Muhammad. Muhammad, as I told you, was an unlettered man who was born in a thing, and he was orphaned much before he was 5 years. He was brought up by his grandfather, and he was considered to be a chaste guy, and it is believed that he never uttered a lie, because Quran in one place only points out that Muhammad, you committed a mistake. Abasa wa tawalla means that you turned your face, Muhammad, when someone was speaking to you, and a frail lady was speaking to you, he turned his face. Even that was considered to be a fault that he committed. So he was trusted. He was Ansar. He was Amin. He was completely trusted in whatever thing. And he married a lady much older than him. She was a merchant lady called Khatija. She was 40 and he was only 25. And when he reached his age of 40, he attains, we believe, that his prophethood, because God started sending message to him. And then he lives in Mecca for 13 more years. And after that, the tormenting was so much from the people who didn't believe. There was no violence. And then he escapes from there and goes to Medina and establishes a small order in that particular place. And incidentally, this is another thing. Bahupatnitva, polygamy in Islam, is said that he married 12 times. Our Quran ordains you to marry 4 times, which is not true. People should understand in the context. In that 114 verses, 114 chapters, and 6,000 verse, there is only one verse with 2 sentences which talks about this polygamy. And I'll tell you in what context it says. It says, it is talking about that whole chapter. Chapter 4 is about warfare. And it says that what is the ill effect of war, how women get widowed and how children get orphaned. And it is all about talking about how to bring up an orphan child. And it says that if you have a doubt that you cannot do justice to an orphan child, in that case, you may marry twice or thrice or even 4 times. But in the very next sentence, it says that by doing that, if you think that you are doing justice to your first wife, don't do that. This is all that is said. And this whole chapter, this whole verse came when Muhammad was 58 years. After 18 years of his prophethood, it came. And until then, he had 1 wife. And we should also look at the timing of that verse coming in, because this was the time where the wars were happening. By thousands, people were getting widowed and orphaned. And that is when, for each of his marriage, there was a reason behind and why he would marry, and he would restrict his people from marrying. That's all that is there about. It's not about that you find an attractive girl and then go and marry, and then you say that Islam ordains me to marry 4 times. No. I mean, it is totally misunderstood by everybody. And first of all, it is misunderstood by the Muslims. Now, he does this, and then he lives his faith. And whatever way he lived or whatever he said are called hadith. And all these hadiths were chronicled after about 100 years. And we have these scholars called, who are this? Muslim, Tirmidhi, and there are 6 of them. These people started collecting these anecdotes, and they collected at a different point in time at a different geographical location. And today we call an authentic hadith only if it appears in more than 2 or 3, because they were collected over a period of time. And these hadiths we believe are very authentic. And this is where we trust in a Quran or hadith or the tafsir, which is a vyakhana of that. Now, how Islam spread? Now, Muhammad conducted about 27 battles, and each of the battle was against aggression, in defense, and never once even in offense. And 60 expeditions he conducted, and there were in that 23 years about 1,029 deaths. And Michael Hart, the father Michael Hart, in his book says that the result of this was that the entire Arab peninsula, which once was a barbaric nation where people looted one another and they lived a life of dacoits, and they buried their young girl children, was become so safe from one end of the other end of Arab. By the time Muhammad finished his life, a single woman can travel from one end to the other end unharmed, absolutely untouched. That level of orderliness came into that society. And that is the whole purpose of religion. And that is the reason Islam spread. Because kings after kings, where there was unrest, they started coming to Arab, and they started asking, saying that, can you come, send some preachers. It's like how Buddhism spread. Can you come, spend some preachers, and we want. And kings after kings started following. It is not really followed by force, because Islam does not. Trust me, there are enough verses in Quran says that why force is not allowed in religion. It is his religion, you need to respect. There are a number of verses that is saying that. Now the question is that, the violence and Islam, it is such a disservice to associate either Muhammad or Quran in its right sense with the violence. Because Quran has been always, or Islam has been always a religion of a have-not. It attracted only a have-not, the capitalist, because it was all about giving. And Quran's famous verses, I have hidden, ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳೋದಿದ್ರೆ, ನಾನು ನಿನಗೆ ಕೊಡೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಲಾಭವನ್ನು ಮತ್ತು ನೀನು ಬಚ್ಚಿಟ್ಟುಕೊಳ್ಳೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ನಷ್ಟವನ್ನು ನಾನು ಅಡಗಿಸಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೇನೆ. So the whole purpose was give. It was not about amass. So it did not work to the capitalists. It did not appeal to them. And that is why there is so much of poverty and backwardness and illiterate. It's not because of Islam they are there. And because they were that, they adopted Islam. Now coming to the last point about Islam and terrorism. We need to put this in the right perspective. I'm doing this because this is the most important understanding that we should have. Islam has been in existence now for almost 1,465, whatever number of years. Out of this, the whole of Islamic country, they lived peacefully because they were poverty stricken. They had no ambitions. They were just there. They were in peace with themselves. They were at peace with their neighboring nation. They were at peace with the entire world because they had nothing to do. And then in 1945, oil is discovered in the Gulf region, and that is where all the problem begins. This is after probably about 1,300 odd years later. Even then there was no violence. The first recorded violence, if you notice, was in 1970, when the Palestinian guerrilla force, they captured in Munich Olympics the Jews and butchered them. Even then it was not Islamic violence. It said that it was a geopolitical turmoil. There was a terrorism that was happening there. And then in 1980, Moscow occupies Afghanistan. And we know the reason, because that was an oil route. And America sends a big troop to train the Talibans. And then onwards, nothing stopped. And in 1990, 10 years later or late 90s, Iraq was occupied in the name of weapons of mass destruction. We knew that there was no weapons of mass destruction. We know that the whole purpose was because Iraq was mooting, buying oil in an Arab currency and not dollars. And that is where the whole turmoil began then. And then 9/11 happened in 2001. And then onwards, there was no stopping this madness. Now look at the background of this madness. Where does this violence come from? Where does this weapon come from? Because Islamic nations can't even produce. They're technologically so backward. Even a double-barrel gun they cannot produce. And there are today the very sophisticated weapons coming. Where are they coming from? Obviously, there are bloodthirsty nations or bloodthirsty, war is an industry today. Violence pays. And there are people who will instigate violence, who will clandestinely support it, who will finance it, and who will make. And so that is why I tell my community whenever I'm speaking, this is a time that we have to pass. There was a time when the Sardarjis passed through this. There was a time the Tamilians passed through this because they were all branded. And it is our time. Because in the name of religion, in the name of ethnicity, in the name of language, somewhere or the other people will find to instigate, put one man another, because violence pays. War is, I told you, is a big industry. And as long as that contains, it will continue. And the last part is that, does Islam preach violence against kafir? Kafir means whoever is not a Muslim is kafir. No, the definition of kafir is not who does not practice Islam. Because a number of places it says that your religion to you. And in number of places the Quran tells Muhammad, your job is only to spread the message and there is no force there. Nowhere. And it also says that if you kill even one soul, it is like committing a murder of the entire mankind. And if you save one soul, it's like saving the entire mankind. There are a number of places it is said. Now, where are these 4 or 5 verses are isolated saying that kill? This comes in chapter 4, where it is all about the war, where the reference to a kafir was, this is like, sir, in simple term, if I have to say this, that let us say that there is a cricket match happening between India and Australia, and a minister goes and says that Australians ka judge udana. He's not talking about go and hit the Australians. He's talking about the 11 people who are playing against you. Or today, let's say that in Doklam, when the Chinese are occupied and there are 120 Indian soldiers are there, Rajnath Singh goes and says that go fight for your country and don't come back until you have killed every Chinese. He's not talking about waging a war on China and any number of Chinese you go and kill. So these simple words that is said, when you take it out of context, it sounds like a violent word. And finally, that I always wondered, what is it that made this religion survive for so long, or any other religion? Here is this concept called enrollment. Enrollment is a word, I don't know whether you people have done this course called Landmark Forum, which is a brilliant course about inner engineering, like Sadhguru does. And this is a very scientific course. They have a different definition for enrollment. Enrollment is that getting a man enrolled into your vision by being. Gandhiji's famous words, if you want change, be the change. He did not say that preach change or do change. There's a difference between your saying or your doing or ultimately your entire core, your being. It's because of that being that enrollment happened. Otherwise, Father, how do you explain a carpenter's son born in Jerusalem, and he was not even a great orator or a speaker, and how is it that millions of people follow him? That is because he stood by, his entire being was that. Or a Buddha, who was a prince who ran away from his house, how would he influence a mighty emperor called Ashoka? Or take Ramanujam, that born in Kaladi, a Malayali, and he only knew Sanskrit. How would he go and set up Char Dhams? And after so many years, he must have lived for 33 years. After how many years that people still follow his preachings? This was a power of enrollment. And how this power of enrollment comes, because every disciple of his, anything that they did, when they were deviating, they said that, this is all fine. But how would we prove to the God tomorrow that we followed Muhammad? And that was the power of his enrollment. And I would end with just 2 small anecdotes. Muhammad died when he was 63 years. He passed when he was 63 years. And he believed that he was poisoned in some place and he had a neck pain. And then he was very delirious. He died on a Monday. On a Wednesday afternoon, after his prayer, he was sleeping. And he was delirious. He suddenly wakes up startled. His young wife Aisha was sitting. And he says that, Ya Rasulullah, what's happening? Ya Prophet of God, what's happening? He says, Aisha, I'm very scared. Hold me tight. And she says that, what's happening? You just tell me. She says, Aisha, tell me, how much gold is there in this house? Now, Michael Hart in his book says, how much of gold is there, you think, with a man who was considered to be an emperor of 1/5 of the world then? And it was not unusual for a man to amass wealth. He says that if he really wanted to amass wealth, the gold could have been enough to cover Uhud twice. Uhud is a small mountain range in Medina. But then Aisha runs through the whole house and brings 4 coins, and that was all his wealth. And he keeps rolling in its hand. And Aisha says, Ya Rasulullah, what's bothering you? And he says, no, this is exactly his word. He says, Aisha, tomorrow I'm going to meet my Lord. How will I give an justification for this hoarding? He says, this hoarding, 4 coins. Aisha understands that evening it was all distributed. And on the last day, on a Monday morning, he wakes up startled again before the early morning prayer. And Aisha was sitting next to him. He says, yeah, Aisha, hold me tight. I'm scared. And then Aisha says, Ya Rasulullah, tell me what's bothering you now. He says, I have been sent with the mission to reform the people. And tomorrow when I meet him, I have this doubt. Will I be able to say that I have done my work? To which Aisha says that, Ya Rasulullah, of course, this is my words, you must be joking. Because you have lived a life which nobody else could have lived. You led everything. And look at the amount of reform that you have brought. And she opens a curtain of his little hut and shows him outside. And incidentally, sir, Muhammad lived in a small hut that he had built himself, an ascetic life. And he had his roof covered with fronds. And he had just 2 pairs of jubba. And one of them was full of stitches. He had stitched it himself. And the other one was a good pair for, to meeting people. That's a life that he lived. And then that morning, she opens a curtain and shows there were multitude of human beings outside. They had come early in the morning because they had heard that the prophet is dying. They had come for the morning prayer. Sorry. I get very emotional. I would get equally emotional, Father, if I'm speaking about Jesus. Buddha. Incidentally, Buddha is my favorite always because his life was an entire thing, maybe another time. Anyway, she shows and he says that, Ya Rasulullah, look at them. These were the very same people who killed their young children, who looted one another, who practiced barbarically. And today you've been able to turn their face towards the Lord and made them surrender ultimately. And what more could you have achieved? And he had a smile on his face and he was gone. So I always wondered how an Islamic world could have been. Because if I ask you today, you'll say that, oh, a barbaric world. But I believe that if there was an Islamic order, what he preached was to be there would not have been progress. There would not have been the so-called development because hoarding was not allowed. Wealth generation was allowed, but wealth accumulation was not allowed. There was no interest. There wouldn't have been inflation. But there would have been probably poverty, but there would have been a lot of peace. There wouldn't have been any rat race. But was it possible? No. I mean, there's an utopian world. It is just not possible, right? So finally, I would say that this was just an attempt by me to put Islam in its right perspective and differentiate between the faith and the so-called followers of this faith. Now, if I have to finally ask, after all my studies, which is the best religion in the world? If you have to ask, without batting an eyelid, I'll tell you that the best religion in the world is a religion that you practice, the religion that you are born in, the religion that your parents brought you up in. As long as you are in peace with that, you are in peace with the entire world. It's like telling, my mother is the best in the world. Does it mean that his mother is any inferior to her? Because religion has got 2 aspects. Father, you explain this. Religion, how it manifests and how it manifests inside. So when you say that my religion is the best, it's only saying that my religion is the best as far as I'm concerned. My parents are the best. Because if I have to ask anyone here, would you be born in the same family, to the same parents, same siblings? Every answer would be yes. I would be born. I'm a lucky guy to be born in this family. Does it mean that any other family is any inferior? Once you trust that your religion is the best, you have no quarrel with any other religion. And that is where you are in peace with yourself. You are in peace with just about everybody else. And my last question to you, is there a religion better than this best religion? Of course, this is an oxymoron. There can be nothing better than the best. But even at the cost of grammatically deviating, I'll say that, yes, there is a religion that we each one of us follow beyond our religion, a religion of charity, a religion of service. I'm sure that each one, I can see a lot of faces who are in different organizations. Take Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan and the trustees. This is a religion of unlimited giving and unconditional love. This is about your unrelented fight against the ills. And there cannot be a better religion than that, because this religion has got the philosophy of the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, because there is no religious segregation here. And this has got the renunciation of Jainism. You give up a part of your wealth. And this has got the compassion of Buddhism. This has got the service motive of Christianity. And this has got the discipline of Islam. And this has got the joy and jubilation of Sikhism. It's all rolled into one. And we are singularly fortunate today to be in this country, because there is ample scope for such a service. I would only end with a prayer that each one of us may remain blessed always, remain united in the name of this nation, and remain always united in our fight against all the misinformations and the things that are divisive forces, and in our fight against only the ills and not one another. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and Jai Hind. Yes, sir. Your forefathers are very friendly with the Hindus and all that we should explain. Each dharma has 5 ingredients. If there is a strong conviction how this radicalization has happened, especially white-collar doctors and all, taking to terrorism, this is an alarming situation. Perfect, sir. Sir, I would not see, just to give you an example, at the height of Sikh, that militancy that was happening, I'm a man who had read so much. I mean, who would ever doubt a Sikh? Okay, me and my brother were traveling to Bangalore in the early 80s. My brother had come from abroad. I was taken into a motorcycle to airport, and we were buying tickets, HAL airport, buying tickets. 2 persons ahead of me, or 2 Sardarjis, they were buying tickets to Bangalore, and we cancelled our ticket and came. I mean, this is a common question, sir. Everybody would suspect why this is happening. And I'll tell you, sir, why this is happening. In the name of religion is an opium. You can pick up a verse without a context, and you can brainwash people. People think that injustice has happened because Muhammad has said that not only committing injustice, even tolerating injustice is a sin. So people can be brainwashed in that. I'll deviate from this and tell you, sir, how people can be brainwashed, either a Hindu or a Muslim or anybody. Because after all, we are human beings. We are peace lovers. But then at the height of a provocation, this can be done. Me and my wife had gone for this play called Mahabharat. All of you would know this. Mahabharat comes into Ambedkar Bhavan. Punit Isar is the one who played Duryodhan in Mahabharat. He has written his own version of Mahabharat from Duryodhana's point of view. But then ultimately he takes the proper things. But how Duryodhana would feel about that? And he's a powerful actor, and language is so beautiful. And then, unfortunately, the Drona and the Bhishma and all were actual actors of those Mahabharat. They had a big fan following. And on the other side, the Pandavas were all stage actors from Bombay, and they did not have such a fan following. And even Karna was a weak actor. And then halfway through, at the end, there is a fight between, Karna falls down, and Krishna tells him, kill him now. And Arjuna says that, no, but he says that it's a Kshatriya dharma, you hit him. And he gets killed. And then finally, Bhima and Duryodhana are fighting. You know that Bhima was a disciple of Balrama. And he has taught him that hitting below the belt is not allowed. And Duryodhana's life was in his thighs. And then Krishna stands by the side and says, hit him there. And Bhima is perplexed, can I hit him there? And finally hits him. And this is Punit Isar himself. And he falls down. And the whole audience is very sad because Punit Isar is dying. And then he falls down. And then they switch off the light. And then he's lying there. And Then they show his Atma getting up. Actually, they replace the body with somebody else. And actual Puneetisar is coming. And he gives a brilliant 10 minutes dialogue. He calls Krishna a traitor. He calls him a hypocrite. He says that how you can be a god. You killed Karna by this. You killed Bhima like this. And everything. He goes. And can you believe, sir? The whole audience gives him a standing ovation. And me and my wife sat there. We are such strong believers of Gita. He said that a Mahabharata can't end like this. This is just a 10-minute talk can indoctrinate people, sir. And then the Krishna character, he was a powerful speaker. And he comes and says that why he had to do what he did. As God, it was his dharma. And he says that as a Manava, I have another dharma to follow certain rules, and I'll pay a price for this too. And he tells that when a child is dying, and if 2 children are saved, we say that God saved them. Then who killed that child who died in that accident? So he gives the whole thing and ends up with that Yede Yede Dharmasha talk. And again, people give a thing. Why I'm saying this, it's very easy to brainwash. In that audience, the whole audience was predominantly Hindu educated audience, except me and my wife we are the only 2 people who didn't stand up. We said that this is not how a Mahabharata can end or Gita can end. But if people can be taught saying that this is adharma, this is what is preached in thing, you have to fight and over and again. And on top, some people in their family has suffered over whatever reason. And then there is an easier way. And why it gets, this is what I said, sir, for 1450 years it's been there. And all this is happening by a minuscule percentage of people who, if you count out the wars, it could be 0.0001%. 99.999% of the Muslims like me, we want to live happily. We want to live peacefully. We want to do our business. We want to go home. We want to spend time with the family. We want to be happy with our neighbors. We don't believe in that. But then, when there is a reason why Pakistan is doing this, because Pakistan has got a reason to wage war against India. They want to constantly unglify India. And there are vulnerable people who can be, brainwashed through this. And then you have enough verses in Quran, out of context when you say that, yes, this is what is done. And it's a very unfortunate thing. Sir, nothing, sir. It says in number of places. If I tell you some of the places, I'll tell you. I'm sorry, I'm probably okay. Till 4 o'clock I have got 3 more minutes. I'll tell you, Umar was a very fierce Khalifa who followed after Abu Bakr, after Muhammad, Abu Bakr, and Umar came in. When he was ruling, Damascus comes under his ruling. There was a very rich church there. And most of the people in Damascus, Syria, people had converted into Islam, but still a few Christians were following. And then people come and say that, Omar, why don't we go there and capture the mosque? And he says that Muhammad has taught me that even if there is one person praying in that church, it is illegal to take over that. And then he further says, haven't you heard Muhammad saying again and again that if a Muslim in power ever does an unjust act to a non-Muslim, and it says that if he puts an extra tax on him and treats him differently, Muhammad says that I'll be the first person to stand witness against that man tomorrow when there is a law of judgment. To that extent it has gone, sir. But people, what do you say about this kind of thing when it is happening? It's happening. One last incident that I'll tell you, sir. Muhammad fought these 27 wars, and all of them were after he went to Medina. The Meccans used to come, they tried to demolish him, that he had to fight those wars. And at one point, he becomes very powerful. He goes with the 10,000 people to Mecca, 450 kilometers, to perform Hajj. And the locals don't allow him there. And most of his disciples say that, let's wage a war. We are 10,000 people, they're a small percentage. He says, no. This is not a position from which we find a war. And that is where this Hudaybiyah, right? Hudaybiyah treaty comes into thing. He sits with them and negotiates a peace document. And that is where he says that we will come at a certain peace in time. You do this. And that is the whole idea. And one more thing. There was this lady called Hind bint, I forget her name. This lady was the most hated lady by Islam because in one of the wars, Prophet's most beloved uncle and a companion called Hamza was killed, and this lady was so hateful that when he died, she opened his heart and bit his kaleja in her mouth. And Muhammad heard that's the first time he cried for Hamza. And then when he came to Mecca, people tell him that this Hind Bint, she wants to come and meet you and she wants to regret. And most of the people say that death is her punishment he has done. And this is Muhammad's words. These are all recorded words. I told you that every hadith has been a recorded thing. He says that no, once a person has repented, we have no right. It's only left for him to punish or not to punish. The only condition that I have is that if she wants to accept Islam, let her accept. But please don't bring in front of me, because I don't know how will I behave. After all, I'm also a human being. So this is the level to which they went, sir. Who would tell these mad people that this is what Islam stands for? But then ultimately you are right in asking this, because at one point we suspected every Tamilian worker, because we think that he's a terrorist. He came to wage terror war. Can we pardon ourselves for suspecting a Sikh community, such a country-loving community, such patriotic community? But all of us suspected, right? Like I told you, we refused to travel because there are two Sardarjis traveling. Every religion has to go through this, sir. It is Islam's time and we'll go through that. And you're right in your place in suspecting. Thank you for asking this question.
One small correction.
Yes, sir.
I think in a hurry you might have told somebody born in Kalini and established 4 temples. It's not Raman, it is Shankaracharya.
No, not Raman. Right, it's Adi Shankara. No, I'm sorry. It's Adi Shankara. Yeah.
I know very well because everything is recorded.
Yeah. No, it's Adi Shankara, sir. Adi Shankara. I'm sorry about that. Perfect, sir. Thank you so much for correcting. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's another topic. Now, there are many chapters, and not necessarily the entire Yasin came in one sitting. It came in different portion, because it talks about death and what happens and then all that. And that is where whenever somebody is died or in dying, people read Yasin, because it's a reminder about the hereafter and things like that. It doesn't preach anything, sir. There's only one chapter, chapter 4. It talks about in the context of warfare. And it came in. Everything has to be read in a context, and then you would understand. This is where I said, listen to it from a place where I don't know, and then everything falls in place. Because otherwise, there is no way a religion would survive for so many years if it did not have material. Scholars after scholars won't endorse this thing. Because the whole purpose of a religion is bring orderliness. How would you believe that an orderliness is disturbed by quoting a religion? It's just not possible. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughtful reflections. Today, Santhavani has taken us across countries, across cultures, and across spiritual paths. Our heartfelt gratitude to all our speakers, guests, and to each one of you for being part of this enriching experience. Now we have coffee break. I request all of you to join us for coffee, and please reassemble at Kincha for wonderful music concert by Vidushi Nityashri Mahadevan, Chennai, and team. Thank you.